is Raquel Sanchez. I work for the Colorado Department of Agriculture for the Colorado State Conservation Board. I am the district operations manager. Today, we are so lucky because we have Amber and Liz with NRCS here, and they're going to give a presentation on the local work group meetings. So I will go ahead and pass it over to them, and I'll just keep letting people in while we go.
Well, good morning, everyone. I am going to let Liz introduce herself and kind of give a little bit of background on her, and then I will jump in with mine and then go through the slides.
Hey, good morning, folks. It's good to see y'all. It's good to be here. I'm Liz With, the Assistant State Conservationist for Partnerships here at NRCS, and super excited to talk to you today about local working groups, a super duper important feedback loop to help keep NRCS on the straight and narrow. So thank you guys for joining us this morning.
And I am Amber Freouf, and I'm the Assistant State Con for Programs. Following Liz's shoes, I keep following her. She was the CSP manager and then moved up to ASTC for Programs, and then I was CSP, and now as of this past November, Assistant State Con for Programs as well. Super excited to be here as well. And I want to extend the thank you to Raquel and the team for allowing us to come on here and share a bit more about the local work groups and the importance of these meetings and kind of helping to close those loops as we proceed through and the big changes that we've made this year. So 3 years ago, when I joined the programs team, I guess 4 years now, I got to remember how long I've been here. Liz asked if this would be something I would be interested in taking on, and I thought it was a super cool way to not only learn more about the programs at the time coming into that new role, but to just hear that local voice. We are definitely a grassroots organization, and partners with the conservation districts help us with that grassroots efforts to get that local voice heard. So local work groups are held annually. It is within our policy to offer these on an annual basis. That way we can gain that feedback from the producers and partners on how to direct potential funding for NRCS as well as training needs. Something that was identified in the past was not knowing what the last year's results were and then how that was changed for the current fiscal year. And so just wanted to take a couple of minutes this morning just to go over those 24 results with you all. And so as I kind of alluded to, the reason we host these annual meetings is for a variety of reasons, but most popular is determining those state resource priority concerns, which is used for different funding mechanisms within different programs, identifying those state priority conservation practices, which will increase the amounts of cost share for those selected 10 priority resource concerns that the state can choose each year. Also helping to identify those barriers so that NRCS can address what we can within those barriers. Some are, outside of our control, such as weather and things like that. But those things that are within our control, how can we help our partners and our staff get to an equal playing ground? As well as pinpointing our outreach needs and then any training needs that not only our NRCS staff may need, but partners and producers as well. So last year, we did ask all 75 conservation districts to provide feedback. We had 46 districts provide that feedback to us last year. So this is continuing to grow. I know coming out of post-COVID, these are taking a little bit to get going again in the in-person realm, but we're excited to see that the participation each year is growing. So the main things that we got out of last year was hearing from those conservation districts on what the resource concern is for your area. I then evaluated all of the responses and was able to formulate what our priority resource concerns would look like for the next fiscal year, for this current fiscal year 25. So you can see we do divide it into ag land and then non-industrial private forest land. As you guys all know, NRCS really likes our acronyms, so that's what NIPF stands for. The ag land does include your cropland, whether it be irrigated or dry land, pasture land, which is those grass areas that may be enhanced with any kind of management practices, outside of the normal grazing operation. Then you have your range land, which is mostly your native species. And that does also include like those associated ag lands and farmstead acres as well. We also were able to identify some key barriers within our responses, and these are kind of the number one responses we saw across the areas within our responses received. So I do have a few things that are a little bit out of our NRCS's control, such as the cost of materials to install the practices due to inflation, and just labor cost within that time, wherever that may be within the state. However, our leadership team last year did look at where those staffing shortages were within NRCS and really geared up and prioritized those shortages within those areas, as well as looking to bring on more engineering staff. Unfortunately, we did lose some of those within the probationary period with the new administration, but are looking to work with partners where we can to help fill these shortages as well. Also saw a lack of understanding in programs and just overall communication. And so our message this year, starting off at the beginning of the fiscal year, which was October for us, going into a programs rollout that happened in November and December across the state in all three areas. And then continued communication with our biweekly NRCS updates. Our message to our staff has been take the time to build those relationships, get to know the practices within your area, and just have that solid understanding and taking the time to commit for self-learning as well. We also asked what are some new technologies that producers are aware of that would be beneficial. And so virtual fencing, of course, continues to rise to the top. I am proud to announce that due to the feedback that we've received for several of the last years on virtual fencing, we were able to put that up and work with our national headquarters. And virtual fencing is on the docket to be offered in the near future for cost incentive opportunities. Also saw the use of drones across the state as being one of those new technologies to be recognized. And so some of the things that we have been doing with both drone and satellite imaging is we've identified a few private industries companies that offer this. And so we've asked them to kind of give short presentations during our biweekly NRCS staff updates, just so that staff's aware of what opportunities are out there as well. And then lastly, I just wanted to point out hydroponics is also on here with some of our smaller acreage folks across the state. And that is another one that is slated to be available for cost share incentives starting in fiscal year 26. And then lastly, we just kind of asked what is some general comments that you all might have. And so here they are. And again, those at the top were kind of the main themes that we received last year. And then those that are going down are are more of what we looked at for changing for fiscal year 25. So looking at, more outreach and success stories. Petra Pepperell, our public affairs specialist, has asked offices to submit those success stories across the state so that she can start blasting those out and sharing all the wonderful things that are happening across the state starting in April. Also knowing more about those education on practices. So again, taking the time for those employees to really understand, dig into those standards and specifications on what is required for their common practices within their area. We also heard producers are looking for quicker turnarounds. And so we did utilize the Act Now fund pools across both CSP and EQIP. Act Now is a process that we can use, which establishes a threshold at the level determined by the state. And so if any application meets or exceeds that threshold, instead of having to wait for every single application within that fund pool to be ranked, if it meets that threshold, then we can go ahead through the pre-approval process. So it's a quicker turnaround within those fund pools from the time the producer applies to the time that they can be obligated. And then finally, I did see that, again, more clarification and program processing. So we've provided several trainings on the opposite weeks from our NRCS updates. We do have a NRCS open forum, which either the programs, our ECS, or our engineering team can plug in and give any training updates to our staff during those hour meetings as well. And then again, taking the time to build those personal relationships with our producers and partners. So switching gears just a little bit and looking forward to fiscal year 25, Liz worked with Nikki and the crew early on, and they were able to get some facilitator trainings going. So their team is up and ready to go. We did also work very closely with them on developing the new material for this next year. Again, continuing to go to the drawing board. Liz and I believe that it's definitely a work in progress and is a living document. And as things change across the state, we intend to be able to change along with you all. Looking at our timeline for this year, districts should have already received from their resource team lead a copy of a letter encouraging conservation districts to host these local work groups. So we are asking for May 16th to be when districts host their meeting. And then in lieu of the conservation district hosting a meeting, we have requested resource team leads to host the meeting if the conservation doesn't do it. However, we really are encouraging those conservation districts to be the local voice and NRCS to kind of take that step back so that that local voice can be heard. And then May 30th is the deadline to return the new task guide and a targeted conservation project proposal to either myself or Liz, and then the area conservationist as well. And the reason why we've upped it from July, because that's usually when we accept those, is we were able to go through and kind of do some updates and have some targeted conservation proposals, which we'll get into here in just a minute. So this is Liz's handiwork, not mine. She gets all the credit for this one. But this is the new task guide for this year. And it also does accompany with a resource team lead report as well that they will fill out. But what we really wanted from the conservation districts was that local voice, taking out that NRCS lingo and just really drilling in on what are the priorities within your area. looking at trainings and demonstration projects. How can we better do outreach, both with the districts and within NRCS? And then just an overall, how are we doing with conservation delivery? Liz, do you want to jump in and say anything additional on the new worksheet?
I'll hold off till the end, Amber. How about that?
Okay. So as I alluded to, we worked with Clint and we were hearing a lot of feedback from the conservation districts that, we host these annual or these local work group meetings every year. We don't really have maybe a great turnout across the state. We're getting the same information each and every year. So what is really the purpose of this? And so working with Clint, we proposed that we consider the targeted conservation project proposal again. We had offered it several years ago within the state and thought that this would be a good way to ramp up these local work groups and really get what is those local priorities and projects within your conservation district. So when looking at if a conservation district is interested in doing this targeted proposal, there are a few things that we are looking for when looking to see what that impact of that proposal will be. First is looking at a targeted resource approach and defining what are those resource concerns across this project. So, if we're looking at something within grazing, maybe plant health would be a resource concern in defining how this project is going to benefit plant health and improve it within your district or watershed. Also, we're asking the conservation district and local partners to help flesh out what that implementation strategy is going to look like. What outreach is going to be needed? What planning is going to be needed for this targeted proposal? And how can these things be streamlined for implementation? And these will be starting in fiscal year 26 for consideration. We've also asked what is the project milestones and benchmarks. And so we're asking conservation districts and partners with the local work group to identify how the project can be completed within 5 years and what the proposal is going to look like as far as implementation and meeting those different milestones across, like we implement in year 1, maybe we do some management in year 2, and in year 3, we're able to measure what we were able to accomplish. And then lastly, also hearing across the board in all of the districts is aligning these local work groups with maybe a long range plan and how those can work together. And so we did take that into consideration when developing this targeted conservation proposal. And so we're asking the local work group to identify how it plays into that local priority and project, as well as how does it tie into the conservation district's long range plan. A few key considerations to think about if the local work group is wanting to do a targeted conservation proposal is looking to see what the local staff capacity is and if there's other partners that can help. As you guys are aware, as I previously mentioned, we did lose staff across the state. And so some of these offices might be harder hit than other areas. And so are there conservation partners like with Parks and Wildlife or Pheasants Forever or partner staff there locally within the conservation district that can help with the planning of these projects? Also looking, we've asked the resource team leads to look at what their backlog is of practices. So if we're in a heavy engineer and practice area with a lot of irrigation, are those practices and designs for the current workload up to date, or do we have a backlog and we're waiting on many designs? And so maybe another irrigation project may not be the best fit, depending if we've got a large backload and then possibly not having engineering staff within that area. And so we're asking offices and districts to consider other areas such as rangeland health, soil health, or forestry as another avenue for these targeted conservation proposals. And is there a way that we can use management practices to then reinvest within those structural practices? And so, an example of this is using a prescribed grazing management practice. Maybe we're looking at improving that rangeland health and providing these grazing plans to producers, and that payment for that grazing plan then can go in and they can reinvest it into potentially another tank on their operation. And then the last big consideration is the funds. And so this is geared up for fiscal year 26. That's why we have asked for this to be turned in May so that we can start prioritizing and ranking these projects across the state and determining if the local group wants to have a targeted conservation proposal or just continue with the local resource team funds that have been allocated the last several years. This is kind of also, I want to just put out, this is kind of a little bit of an unknown of what it's going to fully look like until we do receive our budget. But just something to always keep in the back of your mind as you're having these meetings and talking these things through. You know, it could be one or the other, and we just want to be transparent with that. Also, just want to be transparent that the conservation district will not directly receive those funds. It will be coming out of our NRCS allocation. And so NRCS will be working with the conservation districts and partners to implement the projects. And so here's, I know it's probably a little on the screens, but this is just a quick snapshot of what the conservation targeted proposal looks like. So asking to fully describe what that conservation project will look like. What are the resource concerns? What is the boundary of the project? How do you know it's going to be successful? What practices are needed for that project? And then what you anticipate the total funding need may be. We're also asking to help identify which partners could be involved in this project. That is to help with staff workload in areas, again, leaning on potential other experts within the industry, ag industry, or conservation partnerships to help get planning on the ground. Also looking at that, again, that milestones and timelines. What is the measurement going to be? Can this be done within a 3 to 5 year time frame? And then looking at how does it fit in with the local long range plan, as well as what other additional resources may be needed. And then there on the last page, you can see we've got like a checklist so that you know that you've got everything ready to submit as a full package. And I did want to point out that it does include that project area boundary map. So as you're working through one of these, you are going to want to define, you know, kind of that specific area within your conservation district of where you're really wanting to put these funds towards. And so taking a quick look at our next steps. So as the conservation districts are getting ramped up to host these, definitely take a minute to figure out who to invite. So of course, we're looking at the producers within your conservation district, but it's also good to invite other local partners to the table as well. So, you know, like sitting here in Lamar today, I might look and say, okay, we've got CSU Extension is here within Lamar. We've got a Colorado Parks and Wildlife office here in Lamar. And so we might invite those people as well to these meetings so that we can get their feedback as well. Districts often ask, how do we host these meetings? And it can be in any format. We obviously in person is probably the most profitable, but understanding that that might not happen. And, you know, it does tend to snow or wind blow in Colorado. And so you might have to jump to a Zoom meeting or a Google Meets instead. And then as I kicked off the meeting, I did say that our CSCB regional field specialist attended I believe it was a 3-day training, Liz, is that correct? She's giving me the heads up. So yeah, so it was a 3-day training on how to moderate meetings. And so they have several tools and tricks up their sleeves as well. And then thank you to Raquel. She has gone through what they learned from those moderating trainings and developed templates for conservation districts to use. And that's kind of a snapshot there on the right side of just kind of like a template agenda on if the district wants to just continue on without a moderator and want to moderate on their own. Here's some material that they can use. Raquel also has a wonderful Excel spreadsheet that kind of breaks down these questions on the right in just a different format and way to document the information coming out. And with that, Liz, I'll let you put in any comments that you might have.
Hey, excellent. And thank you so much, Amber. Thank you for all the work that went into this. And thank you for setting this up for success. So again, you guys, this is your opportunity to tell NRCS what your local conservation project needs look like, right? These, as Amber mentioned, these local working groups are required on an annual basis. So even if your conservation district doesn't want to pull together the information, we actually ask the resource team leads to help us evaluate those local team issues. So please participate, because you guys are the key partner, right? You guys are our grassroots connection that have the knowledge and the relationships and the partnerships to be able to implement these things and implement them well. And so I have received a couple of questions from conservation districts regarding how to conduct these meetings. First and foremost, I do want to, as Amber was mentioning, all of your watershed coordinators, your watershed specialists in both CA, CD, and CSCB, we're at this meeting facilitation training. And so if you or your board does not want to play that main facilitator role in helping people work through their local working group meetings, please reach out, because your local watershed coordinators are more than capable. They've got a whole bunch of material. Like Amber said, Raquel developed a whole bunch. We've got a whole bunch of other stuff that we can share with you guys to help you put on these meetings without a whole heavy lift from you all, right? And we've seen a lot of success with those districts that are willing to do coordinating their local working group meeting with potentially their annual meetings, right? Potentially with a meal there, potentially with recognizing valuable producers and participants. It doesn't have to be an onerous thing that takes a whole bunch of time. You can make it its own meeting if you would like. You can make it multiple meetings. We get districts that do that. You can also, I was just at the Chabonneau Conservation District annual meeting last night, and they did a wonderful job. It was about 15 minutes of discussion to set up what local working group feedback was, and then they had individual sheets at each table, and each group just had small conversations, and the board was going to pull it all back together and kind of conglomerate those responses for submission for their targeted conservation proposal and for their local working group after their annual meeting. So these meetings not only help NRCS, but I also wanted to let you guys know that we are tying those targeted conservation proposals to your guys' annual plan of work. So I know you're all already working on your annual plan of works and getting those submitted. You can use this as foundational information to help inform those plans, or use that plan to help inform the conversations that you're having. It's also an incredible opportunity just to get that grassroots feedback for if anybody wanted to start talking through building a regional conservation partnership project, or for other funding opportunities that are out there, being able to show whatever organization you're seeking grants from that you've got feedback from local producers, the contingent that's going to hopefully be implementing these projects or that cares about these projects. That feedback is invaluable. And a lot of grant agencies or a lot of folks providing grants care that it's founded in the community, right? That there's community buy-in. And so this is just a way to help you guys also document that if you wanted to, on top of providing that response to NRCS. Another huge ask that Amber and I have of you guys is there's questions on there regarding training, right? And it's training that our staff potentially needs, but the other huge ask is, can you help us provide this training? We recognize that we have lots of new folks on board, maybe non-traditional folks that have been hired, incredible people. We need your help making sure that they know how you do business, how to do conservation, what conservation looks like in Colorado, what that tractor is used for. They want to know, they need to know. And if you guys can't help us train them to fit your needs, who's going to help us? We're providing that training, but you guys are better suited. You are out there doing this stuff every single day. You guys are out there having these conversations, hearing the talks at the coffee shops, right? Comparing over the fence lines. Help us develop our staff so that we can better help you, right? So that they can better provide that training. Or you know, when the agency was first founded, the idea was that it was just that technical specialist that could travel from farm to farm to farm or ranch to ranch to ranch and just share that information, those trials that other folks have done, so that everybody had some good new ideas in conservation to try out to better suit their operations, their resources, their livelihoods, right? So help us to do that. You guys are our number one key partners in developing that. So if you can have those conversations at your local working group trainings, and if you're willing to provide training to NRCS staff more than just your local staff, if it's something that we can bring in soil cons from across the state or whatever, please just know that that's an invaluable part of this partnership, sharing your wisdom and your knowledge so that we can help more broadly. Amber hit on a lot of really good points with your targeted conservation projects. I do want to make sure that you guys know that we're working, these targeted conservation projects are supposed to be more than just random acts of conservation, right? So although it will be a fund pool tied to your local area for your local use, really talk and dive into what you guys, what's your board, what's your producers, what's your local partners want to see happen, need to see happen to continue to make ag sustainable, right? It's can you target that project by narrowing it down to a specific watershed? Or maybe it's just we need to treat a specific resource concern. Maybe there's a specific noxious weed or a handful of specific noxious weeds that at this point in time you can potentially control if you put a lot of time, money, effort, and resources into it, right? Not ones that cover the whole watershed that are maybe out of the bag, but how can we look at targeting this to have a measurable effect, right? With limited resources. Amber mentioned our staff reductions and our struggle through that. And so really, as you are moving forward, building your targeted conservation proposals, please, please, please focus on looking at the ecological management type activities that you can implement to be able to incentivize conservation. Okay, not maybe necessarily going really heavy in engineering, because a lot of our engineering staff are the folks that we lost. So in order to keep currently contracted projects moving forward, in order to keep up on backlog, if there is a way for the conservation districts to focus on ecological based practices that are maybe a little bit less staff intensive, a little easier to implement, those would be ideal projects. And if your local partnerships, if your local districts, your board members are hell-bent on doing engineering heavy projects, we are asking you guys to help as part of the partnership to help us build that capacity through things like working with local retailers, not realtors, retailers. Maybe if you wanted to do an engineering heavy project, maybe local retailers could help with providing prelim designs for NRCS to review. And so it's more of a review task instead of a full development task. It would be super helpful in moving forward and just helping keeping your NRCS staff above water, helping provide good customer service, and helping us to take care of the customers that already have projects with us. If you want to talk behind the scenes about specific projects, please feel free to reach out to Amber, myself, and we can help chat about those things. And I can't understate how much we appreciate you guys, your partnership, your willingness to conduct these meetings. Like I said, they're required on our end. We have to have that information in the system, but it is so much more valuable and so much more incredible when you guys bring your ideas, your thoughts, your concerns, can raise those. Every single thing that you all submit gets read, at least by one person, but usually it's both Amber and I, and then usually even Clint reads your comments. Every single thing that you put back on those pages, okay? We care, we value, we change things based on what you guys tell us to do. So with that, Raquel, did you want to talk through a little bit more about what you've pulled together and what you guys can help us with?
Yeah, sure. So, like Liz and Amber both mentioned, the Colorado State Conservation Board staff all went through a facilitator training. It was and Liz was there, and Abby was there also, and Faye from CACD was there. We all went through this 3-day facilitator training, and really got to practice and work through different types of meeting facilitation. And then we out of that developed some like working documents that could help guide us in facilitating these local work group meetings for the with the conservation district. So I just really want you guys to reach out to your field staff and ask for help when you're conducting these meetings, because we got all this training and we're just so excited to be a part of it with you all. Um, if you have any questions, you can reach out. I can share all the documents after the meeting. Also, the recording of this meeting will go up on our YouTube channel and our operations website, and I'll send out a link for that also. But really, we want to be there, we want to help. So remember us. And then we did get a couple questions in the chat. So first thing first was Mariah gave some great ideas about how to overcome the STP, the same 10 people. And then she was wondering, are the 10 priority resource concerns singular across the state or areas, or can they get more specific for the RT? And then and can you guys answer that? And I can read off each question individually. Are there and how are irrigation practices funded differently, and can info from the local work group help change this at their level? And can you give an example of a project you'd like to see?
Sure, Amber, we're going to co-hit this, right? We got this. Okay. Okay, so excellent. Mariah, incredible suggestion there. I'm gonna even make a bigger ask on top of what Mariah put out there. You guys, if you are having successful strategies in implementing these local working group meetings, please let Amber and I know. Honestly, if we could get some cookbook ways on how you're having success, sharing that with other districts that have been a little bit more hesitant or unable to offer these local working group meetings would be incredible, right? Especially because we're still probably going to conduct them. So I would love it if you could share your success stories. Mariah, thank you so much for putting that in the chat. The priority resource concerns. So one of the big things, specifically, especially with like the conservation stewardship program, is when you guys choose the priority resource concerns, these are the foundational structure that help make that stewardship threshold, right? Whether folks are eligible for the program or not. So when you're designating those priority resource concerns, it plays a big part in where those ranking points are coming from and the eligibility for folks to individually participate in programs themselves. We do keep the list of specific for your resource team. We keep that information. That's part of the data we collect. And then we also aggregate that up for a whole state approach as necessary for some of the basic, like CSP becomes a statewide eligibility for the two different contract types, right? The ag land contracts and the forestry contracts. So yes, it stays local. Yes, it also goes bigger. So if you wanted to provide extra written information, please do.
And then to piggyback off of, like that staying local, we encourage the resource team leads as they're developing their categories on where to spend the money within their local allocation. They use those resource concerns there locally. And so that's where it kind of plays into more of it being at the local level as well. So they can look and say, oh, we've got a lot of plant concerns. So maybe, let's look at addressing those with some grazing categories. And then as far as going for the irrigation versus the more of the ecological practices with looking at these projects, we're not saying that we're not going to accept any irrigation. We just really want the local producers and the local conservation district to be aware of what that staffing capacity is in your area. If you've got that partnerships and you've got those local realtors, or see, look, now I'm saying realtors, local vendors that can help provide that support that we may be missing on the NRCS side. Include that within your project. One thing that does come to mind is working with all of these throughout the years is we were able within the San Luis Valley to create a fund pool that does look at some irrigation practices, and that's looking at, like those earthen ditches and providing structures for those older earthen ditches that may need new structures installed, and using that to create flood habitat for upland birds. And so that's kind of a way that those can play together as well. And then as far as an example for what we would like to see, the floor is yours. You tell us. Like Liz said, there could be a specific noxious weed within the watershed in this one drainage. And, it's uphill to everybody else, and it could go downstream. And so if we treat that uphill, then it may save it going downstream and causing a problem across the watershed. Like I was mentioning, we might have some grazing management projects within an area. Let's see, what else are some good ones, Liz?
Oh, maybe you've got forestry projects in your area to potentially target maybe some sort of forestry or tree health type issues. We've had projects in the very distant past regarding grouse and management of grazing to facilitate grouse habitat, specifically for those types of resource concerns. Really pie in the sky, right? Even if you wanted to do something irrigation related, and maybe it's not necessarily structure heavy, maybe it's just facilitating, like a lot of our master irrigators classes where they're improving irrigation strategies with monitoring and timing with sensed
looking at soil
data.
probes and sensors.
Yeah. Thank you. Rangeland ecologist here. So that type of thing, right? We've got a lot of folks that want to look at what could a virtual fencing project be like for a whole watershed and a bunch of users, maybe figuring out some way to do the base station provided through other grants or applications, and then working with landowners to purchase those collars separately. Amber is totally on top of it when she says the sky's the limit. This is for your guys's, what are your resource concerns? What are your ag producers struggling with? If there were no money for conservation tomorrow, what would your guys prioritize making sure happens? That's like, what is the most important thing? How can you have a targeted approach about doing it so that we've got measurable benefit to both ag and conservation?
Okay. And then following up on the irrigation topic, Nancy Asherman said the Rocky Ford office has maybe 100 irrigation projects already developed and ready to go. They just need the funds, but irrigation has fallen out of favor for some reason. Um, well, I'm
Well, and so I'm gonna take a quick stab at that. And Nancy, I totally get your concerns. It's not that it's necessarily fallen out of favor, right? We're trying to better serve our customers, better serve our resources, better serve our producers. I'm gonna be real honest with you. NRCS lost 58 people in the last month, right? I mean, a huge chunk of our staff is gone, right? That helps implement these projects. So for this year, for right now, we are asking you guys to help us proceed forward in a measured, meaningful sort of way. Can we still do irrigation? Yes. Do we still know that it's a very high need? Yes. One of the benefits about doing some of these irrigation projects, and potentially if you look at having irrigation water management practices in the contract to pay for that stuff, a producer can potentially then go to a vendor and seek help installing that pivot system, those pipelines. Maybe it's not the same level of standards and specs, but they can use that irrigation water management payment that they'll receive to potentially install structures after the fact, right? So that's kind of what we're asking for, Nancy. I know you have a lot of projects in your neck of the woods. We've got a lot of irrigation projects everywhere. How can we think through implementing those projects to get them on the ground speedy, right? To help get producers into those agreements and still get the conservation benefit without some of the time and staff needs that we might otherwise see. Right. We've still got a lot of work contracted that needs a lot of engineering. There's still a lot of backlog, and we want to take care of those producers just as much as our new ones.
And, to continue on with that kind of piggyback idea with that Liz has going, I just came from Commodity Classics, worked the FPAC booth there, and there are so many vendors out there within that management realm that can provide some of that new technology. Maybe it is that satellite monitoring to help with irrigation water management. And so maybe that's something that the conservation district wants to look at, offering, this new, using newer technology to develop these plans. So like Liz said, producers can then take the money gained off of those management or vegetative. Maybe we want to try some cover crops underneath our irrigation systems as well, and putting it through our crop rotation and, changing up pest cycles and things like that with cover crops. Just kind of using those practices to be able to then provide assistance for the producer to go out on their own and install some of these irrigation improvements. Same flip side for range or forestry across the state too, right? Like they could be using a prescribed grazing payment, getting that payment for implementing a good solid conservation grazing plan, and then using that money to invest in some structural changes within, fences, tanks, pipelines, those kinds of things.
Okay. And then Vanessa Trouch said that she saw on Amber's local work group demo meeting schedule slide that part of the presentation is NRCS previous year's project. How detailed does that need to go? And where do CDs get that info? So I actually think that that snip was was from the mock agenda that I made for helping facilitate a local work group meeting. And so my question would be, you know, when you guys hosted last year's local work group meeting, like who holds on to those documents? Like, does the conservation district have a copy of what was discussed at last year's local work group meeting? Really, this is like you guys telling or explaining to the landowners and the people participating in the meeting what has happened in the past, what was accomplished in the past, and what can be done, what comes out of these meetings, right? So I don't that's on, I want to say, whoever's facilitating, whoever the district is, what your previous local work group meeting came up with. What do you guys think about that? Do you guys keep records of that too?
Amber, I'll defer to you.
Oh, okay. I didn't know she was.
Sorry.
She was
Oh, sorry.
So
I should
yes,
have said.
I do have copies of the years since I've been kind of working with the local work group. So I do have past records as well, and then as well as kind of as the overall summary. Um,
Perfect. I think that's super helpful because in case there was like a turnover, they can come and find out what last year's local work group accomplished or anything um that helpful. Perfect. Thanks, Vanessa. Okay, and so then Mariah commented, not local work group related, but do you have a directory of services, experts, vendors, equipment, tools you can share with the districts?
So
How
Rick, how about we go through these and one by one? And so
Okay.
I'll provide to all you guys. NRCS isn't allowed to keep a list of services experts vendors. That's not something that we can do. We do, if our local partners, I know a lot of different conservation districts do have a list of vendors, folks that ask to participate, so that we've got lists of folks that we can hand to individual ag producers. We just need to make sure that NRCS logos are not on there, and we need to make sure that it's not a recommended list, right? If you get somebody in your district that requests to be put on the list for being able to provide seeding services or pivot design services or whatever it is, everybody gets added to the list, right? We shouldn't, that list should in no way be recommendations for your own liability. It's up to you and your boards to kind of make that decision. But NRCS logos cannot be on any sort of list, and NRCS staff cannot help with assimilating those lists. Sorry, Mariah, I know
No,
it's super helpful.
thank you so much. The next one, sorry, the chat keeps moving. Who and how can districts get NRCS support to collaborate with RCPP applications?
Absolutely. Reach out to Amber or I. We've also got an RCPP coordinator, Marissa Marcus. She is incredible. She hosts weekly office hours to help districts start thinking through projects, and other partners start thinking about projects, and then can set up one-on-ones as you gradually decide that that's the direction you want to head with specific questions. So we can put Marissa's contact information in the chat, as well as our contact information.
And to continue, like piggyback off of that too, part of what Marissa has developed is a question, we call it the State Conservationist Questionnaire, but it helps provide kind of that template questions to start thinking through the process as well of what that resource or RCPP project may look like.
Okay. Can districts see area RT stats on counts for applications to different NRCS and FSA programs? Money, count have been scored and sent up, count funded, count deferred, and their year of application.
We can definitely share some of that information. The other thing that I'd like to, I don't know how to share screens with this. Can I share screens with this?
Yeah, let me give you permission. I'm going to make you a co-host. There, you're a co-host now. You should be able to share.
Okay. I'm going to share my screen, folks. So, oh,
And bear with us as she brings that up. Zoom is not normal. We use Microsoft Teams as our normal platform. So.
okay. Okay, so if everybody goes to www.farmers.gov, that's the USDA's home base for everything, all USDA business across all agencies. When you go there, there is a little button right here at the top that says data. Okay. In this data tab, you can find just about anything. Do you guys, Amber, do you guys see this picture bar? Is it like in the way?
Yeah, no, it's live time.
Okay. Well, I wish I could.
We
get
have,
rid of
it says, we're seeing the screen with radishes and data for farmers.
Beautiful. Okay. So when you guys go here, there's lots of different data that you can kind of dive into the rabbit hole with, right? You can find, if you want to know some more conservation easements data, this NRCS financial assistance program data is data nationally. And when you go into this, you can get information on whole country spending, where that funding's being spent in different programs. There's maps you can drill down to individual counties within that state. For contract fundings amounts, dollars obligated, acres treated. On top of that, there's also this practice tab right here, where if you wanted to find out where practices are being implemented, the top 10 practices across the state, across the nation, you can change it. It pops up, all of these are popped up nationally. You can see all the different funding types. There is more than enough data here to make your eyeballs cross. And if you wanted it to have it as your very own downloadable data so you can run your own statistical, whatever your proclivities are, right there's the download button to get it all. So I highly encourage you guys. I'm gonna go back a couple of buttons real quick, and I'll put this in the chat so everybody's got it. Huge boon for us. That's real-time data. I will say the 2025 stuff is probably not usable, but everything up to 2024 should be pretty correct in real time.
Great. That's super helpful. Thanks, Liz. All right.
Perfect.
And thanks, Amber. If anybody else has any questions, since we're at the top of the hour, you can just send them to me directly and I will get them answered. Otherwise, I should have the recording up and sent out by later this afternoon. I want to thank Liz and Amber again for coming. And remember, CSEB field staff, and we're all here. We can help facilitate these meetings. So you're not alone. And great. I'll stop recording then.
You guys are amazing.